Hi, it's Colin Cowherd. I started The Volume to bring you some of the most authentic voices in sports. While you're here, make sure you hit subscribe. Thanks.
I've been very critical of LeBron over the course of the last couple of games, and I think it's completely fair. LeBron fans can be crazy because he's my favorite player. Literally, I'm into this sport because of him. I was not raised on basketball. LeBron got me into basketball. He will always be my favorite player. I've loved watching him throughout his entire career. I also, as a competitor and as a fan of the game of basketball, I'm going to hold him to a certain standard. Not just within that, but because he's in the conversation for being the best basketball player to ever play the game. That comes with a standard and an expectation that I'm going to hold him to. But at the same time, I have to separate what I'm criticizing him for his effort from the obvious physical limitation that he's dealing with. Throughout that entire second half, he was leaning entirely on his jump shot because he couldn't get by people. There were a couple of these jump shots. There was a step back that he hit over Dorian Finney-Smith where he looked like Boris Diaw when he was with the 2014 Spurs. Like he doesn't have anywhere near the athleticism he had even just 1 month ago. Just before this, whatever this knee swelling thing is clearly and severely hampering him. So that's where it complicates this issue, because outside of, this stretch tonight in the second half where he really dialed it up, he's struggled mightily over the course of the last 3-4 games. And it's obviously hampering him, and I don't understand how it's going to get better, because LeBron has explicitly told us in a post-game presser, he said, it's just like my ankle last year. It's not ever going to be better until I give it rest. It's not going to be better until the offseason. So from that standpoint, do I think this limited version of LeBron that has no lift, that obviously can't unleash any of his basket attacking part of his game, if I'm not getting that in a conjunction with Anthony Davis, this team's not going anywhere anyway. So you have to think about what you're holding out for. If you're going to try to make a run to try to hover around 500 until Anthony Davis gets back, you better believe that group can make some noise. And they're not going to if LeBron is this hurt. Again, Luka was flat out better than LeBron at the end of this game, and I don't think it was LeBron's fault. Luka is healthy. Luka's in a groove. Luka's in a rhythm. Luka was cooking. LeBron is clearly hampered. All he could go to was deep threes, contested threes, and step-back jump shots in the mid-range. He had one blow-by to the baseline where he barely got above the rim for a dunk, but that was the rare exception to what was a half of LeBron having to lean back on his jump shot because he's obviously physically hampered. I want to cut him slack on that front because that's out of his control. But what is in his control is his overall effort and demeanor. And in that second quarter, when things were going off the rails, a lot of it was LeBron. And a lot of it was his effort and focus and energy on that front. And that's what really hammers home the fact, in my opinion, that they need to consider shutting LeBron down for the season. Because he's always going to struggle in these environments. I talked about this a lot 2 nights ago. LeBron struggles with motivation when the team's not good enough to compete for a championship. That fact that the Lakers aren't good enough to compete for a championship, I think that is 1,000% solid and evidenced right now by what we're seeing on the court. They can't do it. So at a certain point, you've got to read the writing on the wall. LeBron's hurt. He's going to struggle in this environment anyway. The team's not good enough. I don't understand the point of trying to push him across this finish line when he's obviously not physically capable of it. It's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult for LeBron because he's got his personal goals, right? Like he's striving for all-time NBA statistical achievements. And I know some people want to poo-poo that because they're not winning. But hey, guess what, guys? LeBron's got enough of a winning resume that you guys can't say anything about that. He's allowed to do whatever the heck he wants. The dude is as secure and solidified of a winner that we have in the league today. And I understand his ambitions on that front. He just has to weigh that against his health. Because if there's one more opportunity for him to win a title as an NBA player, it's going to be some season after this, not this season. And he has to factor that into his calculation about how much stress and how much wear and tear he wants to put on his body. Not to mention all of these, as an athlete, your body is like a chain. Everything is connected. When you have an injury in one part of your body, you compensate for it elsewhere in your body. My guess would be in these games, LeBron is probably absorbing more contact on his right knee. He's probably, when he lands on his left knee, he's probably landing a little bit more straight legged. He is running the risk of a more serious injury materializing from this as well. And so that's why I think he needs to have a serious look in the mirror conversation with himself and with his team about whether or not this is worth it. For those of you who are just joining us, this is Lakers Tonight, presented by FanDuel here on The Volume. I want to talk about Russ for a second because I think it was an interesting game from him in a lot of different ways. You know, Twitter always is going to stick to lowlights with him, and I get it, because particularly a lot of his lowlights this season have been centered around effort, and those are inexcusable. It's kind of like the highlights I was sharing of LeBron today. When you are jogging back on defense and Maxine Kleber just sprints right by you for a dunk, that's inexcusable. That's just an effort thing. And then when you look at the end of the game and it's this close and you're in crunch time, I'm going to think about the time you didn't sprint back on defense. Those things are inexcusable. But there were a lot of highlights going around tonight of Russ getting blocked at the rim by Maxine Kleber. I think it happened to him at least 4 times tonight. And then obviously you look at the box score and you see he's 5 for 17 and you think, okay, he had a rough night. But this is a great example of some of the stuff I've been talking about with Russ. Everything outside of that, everything outside of his field goal percentage, he did his job tonight. He applied a great deal of rim pressure. He created a lot of really good shots for his teammates. He had 8 assists with no turnovers, which is absolutely hilarious in the context of the fact that before garbage time the other night against the Pelicans, he had 0 assists and 7 turnovers. So I don't even know how you could possibly have that. That is about as far apart of a playmaking 2 performances that you could possibly conceive. But he did a lot of good tonight. He generated a lot of rim pressure. He created shots for his teammates. You have to look beyond the 5 for 17, because that 5 for 17 is part of what was caving in the defense and created those wide open looks for Stanley Johnson and created those wide open looks for Carmelo Anthony and for Malik Monk that went in. On the defensive end of the ball, there was a handful of possessions that I could get nitpicky with him. There was one late when the Mavericks got to 105 where LeBron was guarding Luka and Luka threw up like kind of a garbagey lob and he just didn't even attempt to disrupt the lob. He just stood there while the Mavericks laid it in. I can nitpick a few things, but for the most part, Russ did his job tonight. That's all you can ask. Yes, we can trim down on his field goal attempts if the team's all the way healthy, but in a night like tonight, when it's just LeBron and Russ, he's going to have to shoot a lot, and most of his attempts were at the rim. There were a handful of shots we didn't like, but for the most part, Russ did his job. He just had one of those nights where the Mavs were all over him at the rim and he wasn't making anything. That's going to happen. I think those are the 2 things. That's that like little gap or lack of understanding that we have as fans sometimes as we box score watch rather than watching what's happening in the game. You look at the box score, looks like an utterly disastrous game from Russ. But if you actually watch the game, you could tell he was impacting winning in a lot of ways beyond what was showing up in the box score. But again, if LeBron is at the point where his knee can't handle this, I just don't see the point in riding those guys too hard. And at a certain point, you have to think about what the long-term future is for both of these guys. And maybe for Russ, that means playing, but I think for LeBron, it means not playing.